Been busy. We're going to be going down some deep rabbit holes today. Just a quick intro before we dive deep. In the news, there's another inquiry about to begin, and some people have quit this inquiry. And it says here, this sense of control and stage management has left many of us questioning whether our voices truly matter or whether we are being used to legitimize decisions that have already been made. Stage management on a government inquiry. Can you imagine any sort of stage management going on in a government inquiry? Wow. Let's get into some miscellany before we dive down. Lucy Letby was under suspicion just before the deaths of child O and P. So incidentally, just in case you didn't know, I'm sure you did, but the lettering of the babies A to O and P, they're all in chronological order. So when we're talking about A, B and C, they're 2015, and then O and the last two deaths, the twins of triplets, O and P, were sort of circa June 2016, and they all go in chronological order. Okay, so this is I think just before the deaths of O and P, and then the deaths of O and P pushed the consultants to get Lucy kicked off the ward. Now, so myself and Julie, there was a meeting in the organisation where the execs had pulled together a meeting, and a number of us were tasked to look at specifics. My understanding and my recollection is the consultants had done a bit of staffing reviewing themselves and come up with the name Letby. So we were tasked to go back and go through that, which is what myself and Julie Fogarty did. We did it in my office, but separately, looking at, and we looked at using Meditech like electronic notes of collapses that the baby's there, and we came to this similar to the doctors, that she was, and I did a quick calculation, 80% more likely to be on duty either during or before a baby collapsed. And to the guilters, I'll give you that one. Yeah, she was on shift for quite a lot. You can have that one. That's how this whole thing has come about. And I'm talking about stage management. Obviously we know Letby done a lot of overtime as well, which wouldn't have been factored into this, or acuity. But 80%, you would think, okay, that's quite high. But what is it not? It is not 100%, is it? Which is what the court was shown, 80%. Now then, I want to talk about TPN bags. I've moved from looking at the insulin cases and moving on to the insulin cases. So this is the closing prosecution speech. But you will remember that when she was interviewed about baby A, she being Letby, she told the police that in the aftermath of baby A's collapse, she had asked for the bag to be kept. Do you remember that? It's the dextrose bag back in June 2015. You will remember she said she labelled it, I think, and put it in the sluice room. And a friend, Nurse A, was asked about that, and she confirmed that Lucy Letby had asked for the bag to be kept, and there never was an examination of the bag, was there? So that's important here. That, you may think, is quite important, because a child, this is baby A, was attached to a bag. He died within a short time, and the bag was never examined. Incidentally, the prosecution aren't actually alleging that Letby done anything to this bag, but I'll continue. That would give, or could give, if you were determined to injure a child, give you perhaps a degree of confidence that if you tried it again, no one would actually examine the bag. This is what the prosecution's saying. Interesting. She knew no one would examine it. When Lucy Letby was being interviewed about baby F, back to baby F, we suggest in effect she taunted the police saying, "Have you got the bag?" I'm not saying that's the exact phraseology or the tone in which she said it. This is me. Well, why don't they show the tone in which she said it? In the trial, I believe they never actually played the jury any of the interviews with Letby and just done transcripts. And I've even heard that they had actors in to act out the interview for some reason rather than playing the tapes. So I've heard that. But have you got the bag? Because she knew, didn't she, that the police didn't have the bag, and she thought the fact that they didn't have the bag would give her a free pass. But she was wrong, because what she didn't know was about the C-peptide. So some of you may have heard this about the bag. This is Dr. McGuigan. I think he's one of the gang of 7. Dr. Guigan says in Thirlwall, "We've heard that in one Thursday, Friday, Saturday in June 2016, 2 babies unexpectedly collapsed and died, and a third unexpectedly collapsed in a 3-day period, the triplets. And over the following week, lots of discussions happened about whether this should go to the police or not. If a police investigation had been launched at that point, those post-mortems potentially hadn't been carried out yet. There might have been more detailed toxicology. Infusion bags might still be around. That could be, what? There was all sorts of potential opportunities, even at that point, to investigate more thoroughly that were missed by a delay in a police investigation." I just want to read this again. There might have been a more detailed toxicology. Infusion bags might still be around. That could be, So he's talking about potentially testing TPN bags for toxicology. Now then, what if I told you they kept more bags? What if I told you? I bet you haven't heard this. Dr. Green. This is the same Dr. Green who incidentally later went on to do the grievance report. He's head of pharmaceuticals. At some point, I'd gone to the neonatal unit and retrieved some TPN bags. At some point, I'm going to tell you what point this is. It's circa June 2016. I don't know if TPN is intravenous feed that's given to the neonatal patients. I retrieved the bags and stored them in the pharmacy cold store. Langdale, you were aware there was a suspicion of foul play to be taking those bags and storing them, weren't you? Dr. Green: yes, indeed, you tell the police that. We knew there was an issue. I'm fairly sure, because otherwise I wouldn't have been sure about why we were collecting the bags. So I was aware that there was something going on that perhaps shouldn't be. Is that what you said to the police? Yes? Yes. The request came from Sean Williams, is that right, to you? Possibly. To go and collect the bags? Nods. You also speak to Arian Powell. We see the police ask you halfway down. Arian handed the bags to you and you've gone over to get them. Did you have any conversations surrounding why you were taking them? You say, I can't really remember. I think there was kind of, got to pick these up. We hope it's not the reason that we think we have to. But I can't remember any particular conversation. They continue down the page. For what purpose did you retain the bags? Go to the next page, please. Ms. Killingback at the top. I was advised to keep hold of the bags by Sean Williams. Didn't really question it. Under the circumstances, it seemed like a reasonable request. The circumstances were there was a suspicion that somebody had deliberately harmed those babies O and P, and that these samples might be relevant to that, to understanding what happened. Nods. You nod? Yes. But there was no doubt about that from that point. That was very clear to you, having been asked to go over and get them. Yes, yes. And then they end with, so it would presumably stay in your mind and you would have some curiosity about what's happened with that. What's happened about, sorry, what's that about? Dr. Green: yes. And then Langdale just moves on. Well, I'm very curious about these bags. Let's see what Sean Williams has to say about the bags. The clinicians had kept a bag of fluids that one of the babies had been fed with at the same time of death. Chris Green, the head of pharmacist, it was early evening when I did this, as the mortality meeting ended late. I understand the bag was collected and I presume placed in a fridge. I emailed Stephen Cross about the bag of fluids to remind him that we had them. His secretary assured me that he had read the email and that the fluids were being dealt with. Stephen Cross did not give an interview at Thirlwall, and I couldn't find any. His witness statement is available, but it came to a dead end there. The next mention I have about these bags belonging to babe child OMP, 20th of July 2016, from Ian Harvey to Stephen Breary. Good afternoon, gents. We discussed the issue of the retained TPN at the execs this morning. It was felt that at this time we continue to store in a safe and non-degrading way possible. And whatever happened to the bags? The very last I hear from Ian Harvey, Langdale's questioning him. 2 of the samples, the TPN bags that Dr. Green came to collect and were stored at the hospital in case they were used, needed to be used further, question mark. Did you ever mention that to the board? No. Why not? What does that tell you that you are keeping samples? Ian Harvey: that was simply a reflection of the concerns that had been raised, and Dr. Green had informed us that they had been kept. Dr. Breary subsequently informed us that the pathologist had no need of those samples. And then Langdale moves on. Let me see at page 7, move on to another topic. Now then, you would think that why would Dr. Breary, we've got here the prosecution saying that Letby could be sure that no one would ever look at these bags, and so she poisons babies F and L, poisons the bags in babies F and L, and yet when it comes to babies O and P, they actually do keep the bags. So even though the prosecution are saying Letby's sure they won't check the bags, by the time it comes to babies O and P, after babies F and L, they have kept some bags. And Breary says pathologist has no need for them. I've come to a dead end here on those bags, but I would love to know a little bit more about that conversation that went on between Breary and the pathologist. I've got here the full RCPCH report that Jabe has sent to me. It's all blurry. That's the only copy that's out there. It's even the consultants were complaining that the copy was sent to them was of poor quality. So I'm going to read it out here. It says here, most of the infants had undergone a post-mortem from one of 3 perinatal pathologists at Alder Hey, but these did not include systematic tests for toxicology, blood electrolytes or blood sugar, since the infants died in hospital. Incidentally, on the same page, I need to read this out, not related to the bags, but the consultants had explored a number of factors themselves, but not in a systematic way, nor following sound governance and root cause analysis processes, and the involvement of the network clinical governance group had been relatively supervisory, working on summaries of cases rather than examining each in detail. So little bit of a dig there at the consultants. So there was no toxicology done or blood sugars tested on the infant. So I would love to know what this conversation was that Breary had with the pathologist. Was he too scared? He must have been too scared to even ask the pathologist about can you even test them? He's got them. He's kept them specifically to be tested, and then what? He bottles it too much to even ask them. Now then, moving on. Speaking of pathology, and back to stage management. I've got here the coroner, the famous coroner that kept getting bypassed, and we're talking here. He's being questioned about baby C. Now, at no point in the coroner's questioning, none of them actually ask the coroner, what do you think of all of your, speaking of stage management, what do you think of all of your reports being placed in the shredder, flushed down the toilet as completely worthless and useless? No one actually asks him that, because of course they've been overridden by Dewey Evans' findings. and nobody asked them about this. But this is the closest I've got. Baker, I think Baker's one of the lawyers for one of the families. It would certainly be evidence of Mother C that she understood there would be concerns by Dr. Gibbs regarding the cause of death. Was any of that debate communicated to you? Reinberg, the coroner, says, no, I can't remember having any discussions with Dr. Cockeye or anyone else at Alderhay. Cockeye being one of the pathologists. It was a very comprehensive post-mortem report that seemed to produce a very clear line of causation. Yes, the appearance was of a completely natural cause of death. So, what are they saying? That Letby happened to murder child C at exactly the same time as the child was going to die of natural causes anyway. And some doubters might say, yeah, but they only done a normal post-mortem, not a forensic post-mortem. There's a big difference. Well, let's see what the coroner has to say about that. A paediatric post-mortem is absolutely meticulous, not in any way deficient or unsatisfactory when placed against a forensic post-mortem. It's just a different focus. So the paediatric pathologist will look with expertise with regards to paediatric mortality. The forensic pathologist will look for any evidence, signs of criminality, and will involve the police to a vastly greater extent. The post-mortem typically will still be carried out by the paediatric pathologist, with the forensic pathologist looking on. Well, and finally, this is what I want to end with. All things bring us to this. Yes, it does. All things do bring us to this. The coroner, Mr. Reinberg. If your attention had been drawn to a cluster of unusual, unexpected, sudden, unexplained deaths with comments or concerns about a single nurse being present for all of those deaths, or at crucial points during them, we say 80%. Is it fair for the chair to infer that if that had been drawn to your attention, it would have immediately triggered an alarm bell for you? Mr. Reinberg. Yes, it would certainly trigger an alarm bell. I'm not sure that I would discuss it with colleagues on the basis that no. At that stage, it would be Tittle Tattle. Yes, as opposed to something to be taken into account. And that is where that line of inquiry should have ended.